If you have a true, strange, or scary story you'd like to share with the channel, consider sending it my way by going to astheravendreams.com and clicking the button to do so. And of course, thank you. My sister and I never missed Halloween as a kid. We always tried to get the most creative costume, and would trick-or-treat until we didn't see any more lights. I'm sure that our parents wished we would grow tired of it after an hour or so like other kids, but by the age of 14, my parents allowed us to go out by ourselves. And as long as we stayed within the area, we could ride our bikes to the gas station on the corner, which was about 2 blocks from our home. We were allowed to go that far while trick-or-treating, and a block in the other direction. The year was 2005. I was 15, my sister was 12. At the time, my sister was obsessed with SpongeBob, so that's what she dressed as. I tried to dress as Sandy, which included a giant plastic clear container on my head and a white windbreaker suit. My dad actually drilled holes in my makeshift helmet so my mom could sew it to my jacket, which helped to steady it. I thought it looked pretty dang good for what we used. Anyways, since our house was 3 away from the corner, we took the shorter path to the end, planning on going up the next street over and back down to the other side, and continuing the same path on the next street over. There was a decent number of kids around the neighborhood, so sometimes we would walk up to the houses in a group. Some of them were alone, some with parents following behind. The younger ones didn't seem as interested in it, so the group would dwindle down the further we went along. We made it up the street, crossed, and were starting to head back down when we saw what we thought at first was a kid on a tricycle, now riding down the other side of the street in the opposite direction that we were walking. When we started leaving one of the houses, I saw him slowly moving along and stopping, and then he looked over at us. They were wearing all black and had a jigsaw mask. I think it was the second Saw movie that had recently released around this time, so it didn't surprise me that someone would choose to dress like him. While I did enjoy scary movies, I wouldn't have even considered it. They even seemed to be in character because they didn't do or say anything. They slowly turned their head to look at us, looked back, and then just kept going. I took a second to appreciate their dedication to the holiday, and we continued along our path. Another point on our trip, I started hearing that familiar sound of tires on the road. The sound I was used to hearing when riding our bikes. I looked behind us and saw Jigsaw crossing the road, now coming up behind us. I thought it was odd since he was going the opposite direction of us, but was now following behind. Now that he was closer to us, I noticed something interesting. This person dressed as Jigsaw was much older. Based on his size, he had to either have been an adult or maybe in high school. I didn't really notice from when he was across the street, but his knees went out to the side because of how big he was. If he was a teenager, I wouldn't care about him trick-or-treating. I think it should be a holiday for anyone, but if they were an adult, what were they doing? I didn't see anyone else with him, so he was definitely alone. If he was trying to just scare kids that walked by, I could also see that, but to follow them around? That's a bit strange, in my opinion. Either way, I just looked back at them, smiled, and kept us moving. But then my paranoia only grew when I noticed Jigsaw wasn't approaching the houses. He would stop a few feet back from the house we went to, and watch us as we walked up to the door. Once we got back to the sidewalk, they would start moving again. I looked back at them several times, and they would do nothing but stare ahead and pedal until we stopped. We reached the end of the street and crossed to the next block, and Jigsaw stopped at the corner. I thought, again, Maybe it was just an older kid playing a prank, but was told not to go any further than that street. I was actually starting to feel a little relieved when I then heard the sound of the tricycle moving again. I looked back, and once more he was crossing and coming up right behind us. Once he was on the same side as us, I tried to poke a little to see if I could get anything out of them. I asked if they were lost or scared, and they just remained still and didn't speak. They didn't nod or shake their head. They didn't wave or shrug, and they didn't say a word. I asked them if they were trick-or-treating, and still nothing. I don't know if I was more scared or annoyed by them, but I rolled my eyes and told my sister that we should just keep going. The further along we went on the street, the more my anxiety started to grow. Why was this person following us? What were their intentions? But then my thoughts started spiraling. What if they were just trying to blend in with the others, but then were planning to kidnap us? I finally looked back and said one more thing to them. This time I told them they were being weird for following us, and said something about crossing the street and asking them to stay on that side. They once again said nothing, so I grabbed my sister's arm and we darted across the street. Between being a bit freaked out and the air turning cold, we had to stop and catch our breath. I looked to see Jigsaw still on the other side of the road, but he was just staring at us with those creepy dark eyes. It gave me the chills. We began walking to the houses again, and we both agreed to just skip that side of the street and go home after this row of houses. Jigsaw was obviously getting to my sister too, and I didn't want them to ruin her night. We continued on to a few more houses until I heard the trike move again, and it was crossing the street. I'd had enough. Don't get me wrong, I was freaking out on the inside. I didn't want to approach this thing, but I felt like I had no choice. I waited for him to cross, and then I approached him. I shouted at them that they were being a creep and to just leave us alone before we told our parents. I stood there firm on my choice of words as my sister shouted something at them too. Then it fell silent again. Everything seemed still. I could hear the slight shuffle of the trees and my own breathing, but there was nothing else. I stared at this person watching the shiny red cheek spirals glisten off of the moonlight. They didn't say anything back. Didn't apologize for their behavior. Nothing. Feeling a bit defeated, I went to turn around when I saw Jigsaw's head snap to the side. I thought maybe I was going to get a response after all. And as I went to say something, I started hearing a low chuckle. It was deep and slow at first, but then his head snapped back straight, and then the loud laugh began. It was some bone-chilling laugh, like from a movie. Like he had some kind of speaker or something playing it. Its jaw bounced up and down as if it was really moving or laughing. I felt frozen in place as I watched this thing just laugh. I could hear my sister behind me saying that he was scaring her and yelling at him to stop. The laughter was so loud that it was unnatural. I turned to go back to my sister when she just screamed. I then turned back around to see Jigsaw now barreling towards us on his little trike. I didn't even think. I grabbed my sister's arm and yelled for her to run, and we both took off. I could hear the trike speeding up and getting closer. We made it to the end of the street and we crossed back over to our block. Now we just had to run up the incline to the end of the street to get back home. The hill was going to wear us out, but I was hoping that Jigsaw would have more trouble getting over the hill than us. I think I was right, too. We were exhausted as we reached the top, but I think the pure fear and adrenaline kept us going. As we reached the top, I took one last look as I could still hear the laughter, but it was quieter. For some reason, the possibility of them getting off the trike didn't even cross my mind. But to my horror, as I turned around, I saw Jigsaw climbing the hill on foot, dragging along the trike in his hands. Now standing, this person looked huge, which made it even worse in my mind that this guy was following us. I had approached him a couple of times. He could have easily grabbed me and I wouldn't have been able to fight him. I once again pulled my sister to keep going and we ran until we got home. We burst through the doors and my mom was sitting on the couch asking us what was wrong. I tried explaining between breaths as my lungs burned. My mom hollered for my dad and they went outside looking for this person. And by looking, I mean they went to the end of the driveway and looked both ways. They then came back in and told me that it must have been someone just playing a bad prank. They honestly didn't make it seem like it was that big of a deal. We decided to end our trick-or-treating then, neither of us interested in going back outside. We did get to stay up, so we camped out in my room and played games until we fell asleep. We never heard anything else about the jigsaw, on the news or at school or even from anyone in the neighborhood. It really did seem like we were targeted. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe it was just someone messing around, but it really scared the hell out of us young kids. I get being creepy. Maybe doing the laugh when someone gets too close, but to follow and chase children? That's not okay. That could be taken very wrong. Hell, now that I'm older with a little boy of my own, I would be hunting that person down if he came home telling me something similar. So, all I have to say there is, yeah, if you are an adult, don't chase kids around. And if you're a parent, take your kids seriously when they come to you scared and tell you about something. Do it before they don't come to you at all. This happened about a decade ago, and was one of the most terrifying things that had and has ever happened to me in all my years alive. I came out of it mostly unscathed, but mentally, I was distressed for a long time after this happened. It was a chilly Halloween night, the kind that kind of bites at the nape of your neck and drags you down, making you tired within the first hour or two. My husband, Mike, had taken our little girl, Sophie, out for her very first trick-or-treating experience, and I got to stay home and hand out candy. I wasn't upset about that. I wanted her to have a good time, but I also knew that we were going to have a lot of trick-or-treaters coming through as we have every year that we've lived there. I wanted to be there to see how she managed, but Sophie has always been a daddy's girl, so she wanted him to go with her. It's alright, I get it. I was the same way at her age. I set up a cozy little area by the window, complete with my blankets, hot chocolate, and my old Kindle, just waiting for the doorbell to go off. I would read a few pages and have to set it down to give out the candy to the kids that came by. I was actually enjoying it, having some alone time, but getting to talk to some kids about their costumes. There were some pretty fun ones. There was one girl that was a zombie hot dog that was amazing. And I remember just how happy that little girl was when I told her how much I loved her costume. As the night went on, the rush obviously started to dwindle, and I was getting more and more of my book read in between each doorbell ring. It was around 8:45-ish when the doorbell rang again, the first time in quite a while. I opened the door expecting to see a group of kids smiling at me, but instead I was met with a lone, tall figure. He wore a grimy, tattered suit and a grotesque mask that seemed strangely out of place. It was simple, mostly just plain and white, but splattered with red to look bloody. Bit old for trick-or-treating, aren't ya? I tried a joke, but I could hear my voice wavering slightly. The man didn't reply to me at all. He just lifted his hand as if he was expecting candy. I was all for ending this interaction, so I dropped a few pieces of candy in his hand, and after a few moments of us just standing there silently, I kind of smiled and said something like, well, happy Halloween. He sort of tilted his head at me and didn't move, so I went ahead and shut the door and locked it. I tried to shake off the odd feeling, telling myself that it was Halloween, and he was just really playing the character, so the creepiness should have been expected. But my comfort was short-lived. A few minutes later, I heard what sounded like a tapping coming from the back of the house. I initially thought that it may have just been a branch tapping on the window or something like that. I walked into the kitchen, and I glanced out into the backyard, and what I saw caused my heart to skip a beat. There, standing on my back porch, seemingly just standing there and studying the back door, was the man in the suit with the bloody mask. I could see what looked like a pry bar in his hand, and he was holding it like he was about to use it to pry the door open. I stood there for a few moments, shocked and scared, but after a few seconds, he glanced over and we made eye contact. When we did, he lifted his free hand and waved, which freaked me right the hell out. As soon as I pulled back, I heard him starting to kick the door, trying to bash it open with his foot. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really know what to do. This man was trying to kick the back door open, and I didn't know if I should hide or run, and where I would run to. I decided that running was my best bet, and within seconds, I was making a dash to the front door, unlocking it and running out onto the front sidewalk. I figured if nothing else, this would put some distance between myself and him, and if he was trying to get to me, then he would have to run around the house and jump the fence, which gave me some time to get to the neighbor's house or something, which is actually what I did. As soon as I got out onto the front sidewalk, I ran to the left towards the closest house with the lights on, and started banging on the door. An older gentleman answered the door, holding a candy bowl and holding a bit of an annoyed look on his face. His stare changed to confusion when he saw me, and I started telling him that someone was trying to break into my house, and that I needed him to call the cops. Thankfully, we did kind of know each other in passing. We weren't close, but he knew who I was, and I knew who he was. So, he mentioned for me to come inside, and asked me what all had happened. I told him about the creepy guy that came to the door, and then told him that, before I ran out of the house, that same man was trying to kick in the back door. He nodded, grabbed his phone, and quickly dialed 911. After about 7 minutes, the police pulled up in front of his house with their lights flashing, and I went out to meet them. They asked me to tell them again what had happened, and I explained the whole situation to them. When they checked the house, the man was no longer there, thankfully. But every room between the back door and the living room looked like it had been ransacked. He had thrown the dining room furniture all around the room, and had pretty much destroyed the living room. But nothing was missing, and he was already gone. I described him to the cops, and they said that they would be on the lookout, but without knowing what he actually looked like, there was very little chance of ever finding him. Mike and Sophie got back home while all of this was unfolding, and I had to tell Mike about the man and explain the whole thing. He was obviously not very happy that this happened. There was never any indication that they actually caught the guy, and with the exception of the door being messed up, a couple of busted dining room chairs, and my Kindle being completely destroyed, nothing else had been damaged. We turned the lights off after that in an attempt to dissuade any late trick-or-treaters from stopping by. That Halloween actually did scar me mentally. Every time the doorbell rang, I would tense up and jump slightly, even though I knew that it wouldn't be him. After that, the spookiness of Halloween kind of lost its appeal to me, and when that night rolled around the next year, we both went with Sophie to do her trick-or-treating. There was no way in hell I was going to stay home alone again after all of this played out. One of my favorite things to do for Halloween with some of my close friends was to go to the haunted houses near us. I say near, but one we actually drove an hour and a half to check it out, and it was well worth it. I've never had an issue with the houses where the actors would grab you or chase you either, but I know some of my friends didn't like it, which was understandable. Some of the places even sold glow stick necklaces that meant they didn't want to be touched. Those are always a win-win too. One year we decided to check out a somewhat local haunted house that we hadn't been to for a while. It started getting a bit cheesy, so we stopped going, but then we saw reviews and posts about it being under new management and how much it had improved. So we wanted to check out how accurate that was. It was going to be my boyfriend, Bryce, and I, as well as our friends Miguel and Angela. We met up at my boyfriend's place and rode together to save on parking, remembering that it can get pretty hectic downtown. There was already a decent-sized line at the entrance, so we took our place and waited. They typically had people walking around the outside, entertaining us. Some of them sold little trinkets like the little hands-off lights, but none of us bought one. Some people just walked around and spoke to the guest. Some even recorded the lines and themselves. There were also a few actors in costume, and they were great at not breaking character. They may be chasing each other for the show, but some of them may even try to scare some of the people waiting. It was all part of the experience. There was one person that seemed especially good at his job. Based on their build, I assumed it was a male. First, they were very tall and lanky. They had on a pair of dirty, torn-up jeans, a white tank top that appeared to be stained with fake blood and more dirt, and then they had a plaid sleeveless shirt that was fraying at the shoulders. Then, there was his mask. It covered his entire head, and the eye holes were probably just barely big enough for his eyes. You could tell when he would look to the side and you could just see the whites of his eyes. The mouth part was cut pretty wide, but then it looked to be stitched back together. To be honest, it was one of the best scarecrow costumes I've ever seen. But then his movements made it that much better. He moved with this unnatural, jerky gait, and would stop to stare at people in line with his head cocked at an almost unnatural-looking angle. It was giving off those creepy, uncanny vibes, and I think that's what made it that much worse. When he got closer to us, he seemed to linger a bit longer. He approached us, and as we were all laughing nervously, waiting for that jump scare, he instead let out this weird groan and kept moving down the line. It was weird and definitely had us on edge for a moment, but we quickly moved on, knowing what we were here for. It was finally our turn, and after getting our tickets, we approached the entrance ready for a good, innocent scare. Inside the house, I could already tell there were improvements made. There were well-established themes in each room, instead of just creepy stuff everywhere and simple jump scares. There was a cannibalistic kitchen, a decrepit nursery with some realistic yet creepy-looking baby dolls, and even a decent-looking morgue completed with moving bodies. The actors were all really good, not only with the jumping out at you, but their screams of pain and horror were almost too good. They definitely kept the unsettling feelings high. Then there was one room that seemed to bother me more than the others. This room was lit up more than the rest. There were fake candles that lined the entire room, which illuminated all of the tools on the walls. It looked like any and every tool you might find in a repair shop was hanging on the walls, all of which looked old, used, with something caked to the bottom of them all. And in the back corner of the room, standing as if caught off guard, It was the same scarecrow that we had seen outside while we waited. He was also now holding one of those small metal handrakes in one hand and a rope in the other. We talked about this room later, and the closest thing we could think of was it was either supposed to be a torture room or maybe a crazy farmer or something. It didn't make a lot of sense to us at the time, and while it was pretty tame looking compared to the rest of the house, it definitely had quite a huge unsettling impact on me. I didn't want to linger long in that room, and I think Angela was getting the same feeling by the way she was gripping onto MayaL. As we walked by, the scarecrow followed us with his head until we were almost out of the room. The exit was closest to the corner in which he was standing, so I hardened myself, expecting a jump scare. But instead, he said in a soft and very monotone voice, "This room is not for you." I looked at him and continued to push along with the rest of my group, ready to just get out of there. I know it was a haunted house, and I could handle being chased or maybe even grabbed or pushed, but something about that person in that room made me feel really uncomfortable. Once we were out of there and started walking down the hall, the feeling dissipated, and I looked forward to the rest of the event. We were back to enjoying the normal spooks of the haunted house until we made our way down a steep set of stairs that I believe led to the basement. Now, that room was really set up to look like a torture room and dungeon. There were fake bodies and blood splatter everywhere. One actor appeared to be chained to a wall and was screaming for help. This room was very creepy, but I couldn't help but wonder, if this was supposed to be the torture room, then what was the earlier room we were in with the scarecrow? We continued to the other side of the room when, out of nowhere, all of the lights went out. The actors started crying and mumbling about how they were on their way and to run and escape. It sounded pretty normal for a haunted house, but then I felt something brush against me, causing me to yelp. We all nervously chuckled and picked up our pace to get out of there, still in the pitch black darkness. Then, I heard Angela scream. It was an honest, scared scream, and I assumed that someone may have touched and scared her too. We continued walking until we were in a small hallway. There were a few hanging candles illuminating the hall slightly, and we all looked around at each other as a way to check in and make sure that we were all okay. But that's when my heart dropped. Angela wasn't behind me. Looking around us, she was nowhere to be found. We waited in the hall thinking maybe she got lost in the dark until we heard people coming. But it was just another couple and not Angela. We thought maybe there was another hidden path that she had found. I had heard of some haunted houses and similar having alternate paths, so maybe that's what happened to her. We had to proceed with others coming up behind us, and shortly after there was a tunnel that led to a door that you had to climb out of, and then you were back outside. There was a canopy with some end-of-event items with directions to get back out front. We went outside, looked around, but still saw no sign of Angela. We saw one of the workers and asked them if there was alternate routes, and she confirmed that there was just the one. Angela should have exited the same way, but she wasn't out there waiting for us, and she didn't come out after. So where was she? We told the worker out there that she was missing, and at first she seemed uninterested, saying she was probably just lingering or got turned around, assuring us that one of the others inside would direct her where to go. So all we could do was wait. We became very impatient after about 10 minutes, and MayaL was about ready to barge back in to find her. We were close to the exit, so there was no reason that it should take that long to get out, even if she did get turned around. Finally, the worker asked us more about where we got separated. We explained what happened in the basement, and she immediately looked at us funny when I explained being touched. She said that the actors in that room were actually not supposed to touch us, per their terms since it was dark and we couldn't see them. And therefore, we're not supposed to grab or separate groups. She said that she would get a manager and walked off. They returned and got a description of Angela and what she was wearing. They stopped allowing groups to go in, and the manager and someone else started walking through, refusing to let us go with them. It took us about 40 minutes to walk through, but without stops and the lights being on, I'm sure you could get through it a lot faster. This made sense when finally the manager burst through the exit in 20 minutes, with Angela in front of him. I was relieved to see her, but Angela looked traumatized and obviously had streaks of tears running down her face. We asked her what happened, with the manager still standing with us, and she explained how she was grabbed. When the lights went out in the basement, she felt someone grab her, which made her scream. She thought it was part of the event, even though it still scared her, but they seemed to be dragging her along, with their arms crossed over her chest. That's when she began to panic. Something told her that even if they do touch people, they shouldn't be dragging them away. She said they stopped and whispered something to her and then seemed to leave her where she was. It was still dark, so she felt around to get back to us, but realized that she must have been in a small room based on how close the walls were. She found a doorknob, but it wouldn't open. She said that she screamed for help, but no one answered, and she feared that people may have thought that she was part of the show. That is, until the manager opened the door holding a flashlight. The manager looked confused and livid. He apologized to us and assured us that that was not part of the show. He said the actors were not supposed to touch us at all, and he had no idea who could have done it. Because of the situation, the manager had to call the police and make a report, even if we didn't plan on pressing charges. We provided our experience, once again, and all the encounters we had, and we were asked if we noticed anything odd, noticed anyone favoring us, etc. That's when I remembered the Scarecrow. I told them how he acted outside, and even in the room we saw him in, and the others agreed that it was definitely strange behavior. We had to wait around while the police spoke with some others and tried to locate our suspicious Scarecrow. Sure enough, the manager came back around with the Scarecrow walking beside him, but this time he didn't have his mask on. We confirmed it was the same guy, and the manager said that he had something to say to us. That's when he apologized to Angela for grabbing her. I knew something about him seemed off, but I honestly wasn't expecting that. What I wasn't expecting even more was how he smiled at her as he apologized. He very obviously did not mean it. Apparently the Scarecrow was a new actor, and even after being told and warned that this place was hands-off, he was adamant on it to make it creepier. I can't help but wonder if there was more to it than that, by the way that he looked at Angela. She ended up pressing charges on him, and the manager refunded us for our tickets, assuring us that he was being terminated and that it wouldn't happen again. But sadly, the damage was already done. Angela was too freaked out, for good reasons too, and she was no longer interested in haunted houses. Bryce and I still go to them sometimes, but we're always holding hands, or my arms are wrapped around his, hoping to prevent something like this from ever happening again. So that, my friends, was a collection of some terrifying Halloween stories. I try to do a Halloween collection every year, and I think this one was a good one. Some terrifying stories of people trick-or-treating, haunted houses, being the person handing out candy. Really just an all-around good collection, in my opinion. Good stories, terrifying stories. Let's see, anecdote time. Trick-or-treating, Halloween. I don't really have any scary Halloween stories for you guys, for myself. I think I've mentioned it before, but let's go ahead and embarrass myself again. Whenever I was very little, like 5 or 6, this is stupidly a core memory in my head. I was very little. We were trick-or-treating. My dad was driving us, me and my sisters, around, stopping and telling us to go there, and come back, kind of thing. Because he was kind of lazy with it. But anyway. So, we were going and trick-or-treating, and like I said, I was like 5. I was so young. But as we were going, I just remember that at some point in time while I was running, I had peed my pants. And I ran towards my dad from a person's house yelling that I peed my pants. That's my horror story. Like I said, I was like 5 or 6. It's a core memory at this point. It's burned into my brain, as it always is. Yeah. As those silly situations and embarrassing memories are. But hey, little 5-year-old me, yeah, I'm now telling your story to hundreds to thousands of people. Don't be embarrassed, little dude. It happens to the best of us. Right? Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed these terrifying Halloween stories. If you did enjoy them, please do hit that like button, the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please do consider subscribing. That helps tremendously. And if you're feeling ever so bold, go down below the video and leave me a comment with your thoughts, how you're doing, what you have planned for Halloween, your favorite Halloween story. Well, if you actually have a Halloween story or something like that, please do send it in. Go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. You can also hit the join button down below the videos or go to the Patreon link in the description to sign up for early access to content like this and other things. There's also the coffee link, KOFI, that's KO-FI, where you can buy signed posters. We're at double digits for one of them. I've sold 10 of them on the poster 1, the pink one. The other one, we're still at 8. So, I also got my pins in. Hopefully I'll post those here soon. I don't know what I'm going to charge for them just because they are smaller than I thought they would be. They're really cool looking and they're acrylic, but they are smaller, so I don't want to charge like $10 for them. I'll come to a decision on that. I'll probably do like 10 with free shipping. How's that? Does that sound okay? Maybe that sounds okay. I don't know. Anyways. Yeah. You can listen to other platforms like Spotify or Pandora or Amazon Music or Audible. And I think that's everything. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully you're having a beautiful weekend. Hopefully I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.